When it comes to socket replacements, CPU socket replacements, you generally have two options. You have either FoxConn sockets, which come with lead-free solder, and the load sockets, which come with leaded solder. Obviously, leaded solder will be a lot easier to work with. It flows at lower temperatures, so you're kind of saving the board a little bit. But recently, I discovered that I may have been wrong. Actually, I'm pretty sure I was wrong. Typically, FoxConn sockets, let me show you one over here. You have a nice FoxConn logo, right? So that's usually how I recognize our FoxConn sockets. Also, when you look at the balls, you can tell maybe not from this picture, or maybe you can't, but I can tell immediately that this is lead-free solder, by the way it looks. Now it's easier when you compare them side by side. One is leaded, one is lead-free. You see the difference? So the left one is leaded solder. You see every ball is nice and shiny. Lead-free solder, you see that the balls are kind of different. Some are shiny, some aren't, right? So that's usually how you can tell. So immediately on this one, we know that this is lead-free solder. However, I've been using these thinking that they are indeed leaded solder. But it looks like now that FC over here, I thought this was CC, but this is FC, which makes sense that it's a FoxConn. And when we flip it, this is lead-free solder. And I have a tray of these over here, the AM5s, and they're all lead-free solder. Typically on AM5 I use these ones, right? Loads with leaded solder, so nice and shiny. That's usually what I use. But I was convinced that these sockets with FC, they were not FoxConn sockets. So now we're gonna have to answer a question. Can you actually resolder successfully a socket, a lead-free socket, on my universal profile? My universal profile goes to 205 degrees. The bottom of the board usually to 210 degrees, although recently I reduced it a little bit. Now it's perfectly fine for removal, but will the socket actually solder on correctly? Now we're gonna do a little experiment today. We're gonna do two boards. One board will have a FoxConn socket, the other one will have load socket. So you'll be able to compare on the sped up footage at what temperature they drop. And loads typically start dropping or drop completely at around 185 degrees. We still bring it to 205. The FoxConn sockets usually drop at around 200 degrees. But just because they dropped, did they actually solder on correctly to the board? So let's get two boards and let's resolder two different sockets on them and observe the process. Let's speed up the footage because it's going to be so boring. Okay, I don't think I need to tell you which one was which, but in case you didn't notice, the first one was LED free, the FoxConn socket. So that one dropped at 190, and it dropped very nicely. I like how they drop. The load sockets, as you saw, it dropped at around 150, 160, right? So not even at 185. That's why usually I can't really catch when they're dropping, because I usually look at around 180, 185, but at that time, at that point it's already dropped. But they also don't drop the same way. You saw that it's very subtle drop. So either those balls are smaller, although they shouldn't be, or solder just flows differently. It's much more subtle, gentle drop, and different. I would say it kind of feels like it has less distance to travel. I don't know what's up with that, but that's generally the difference. So now our question is answered. So my profile for 205, I think it's fine. I'm still gonna resolder or reflow the socket on the profile that I just uploaded. You can find it as a FoxConn socket replacement. The difference is that it's a little more robust, meaning instead of waiting 20 seconds on previous two steps, we're waiting 10 seconds, and the maximum temperature goes to 215 degrees, so 10 degrees higher than the universal socket replacement. But it looks to me like if they drop at 190, I don't think we need more than 205. And again, you don't want to overheat the board in general. You want to use the lowest temperature possible to allow you to get the job done. So I think my universal profile works perfectly fine for FoxConn sockets. But if you're not sure, because it also greatly depends on the bottom temperature. And at the bottom, I had 210. So I'm pretty sure you can use the universal profile for FoxConns. But if you're not sure, just use my FoxConn profile. That's 10 degrees higher. And it definitely should work. It also probably depends on the sockets, because AM5s are pretty easy. The one that I'm going to redo is either 1200 or 1700, I don't remember. But it's Intel larger socket, right? There's fewer pins, but it's a larger socket. So they drop differently. So there is a possibility that that one didn't solder on everywhere. Also, the FoxConn socket we tested has the FC logo, not the FoxConn logo. I'm not sure if there's a difference. I'm not sure what's up with that. Did they just change their logo or something, or they just make two of them? But that doesn't really make sense. Why would they make two kinds of sockets, right? There's got to be some difference. If they're labeled differently, there's got to be some kind of difference. Also, the cap says FC, right? The cap that is on the socket, but the socket itself doesn't say anything. And on FoxConn sockets that I know are FoxConn, they also say FoxConn on the side. These ones don't really say anything, not even FC on them. So I don't know, your guess is as good as mine. But I'm pretty sure my universal profile works fine. I wanted to make sure, I wanted to test that, because I called into question all my previous FoxConn replacements. I usually use loads, so it's not a big deal. But in some cases, only FoxConn is available, or FC is the only socket available, especially in case of some less common sockets. So I was thinking, was I doing it wrong this whole time? Were they not dropping correctly? But it looks to me like it was fine. So I'm pretty sure all of those boards are fine, and the majority of them work after the replacement. So, but majority, not all of them. Alrighty, hope you guys found this useful. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you guys in the next one.